This program contains coarse language.
The year was 1978 and 8 in every 10 cars sold here were made in Australia. For many it was a source of pride.
Every car you see on the road, you know that you made something that's in that car.
But now we're told the car industry is too expensive.
There's a hell of a lot of industries in Australia that would love to get the assistance that the motor vehicle industry is getting.
But what's the real impact of the car crash?
There's 70 people that have worked for me that aren't going to have a job.
The end of the road for the car industry. Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Bannerman, sitting in for Kerry O'Brien. When the Prime Minister signed trade agreements with Japan and Korea last week, one of the selling points was the prospect of Australians buying cheaper Corollas, Camrys and Hyundais. But will cheaper cars make up for the loss of a domestic car industry? Australia is one of only a handful of countries that can take a vehicle from concept to car yard, designing, testing and building cars. But come 2017, that will come to an end. Last May, Ford called time. Holden followed in December and Toyota in February. For the critics, it's good news to see the end of an industry that's always relied on tariffs or taxpayer subsidies for its existence. To industry supporters, the loss of car making threatens to erode the nation's skill base and its industrial capacity. Tonight, reporter Stephen Long goes to the regions that will be hardest hit by the end of car making, assessing the impact on the people there and the broader economy.
It's a Sunday morning in Melbourne's outer suburbs. Arthur and Gail Martin are taking their pride and joy out for a spin. A 1964 E.H. Holden Premier from the glory days of the Australian car industry.
We had about 4 of them in the family at one point because my dad was keen on them and they were reliable and easy to work on.
The E.H. Holden was Australia's fastest selling car, 250,000 bought in 18 months after its launch in *63. This car used to belong to Gail's mum. It's been in the family for 50 years.
Sounds like you two had a love affair with Holden that led to a love affair.
Yeah, it does. I remember Arthur gave me my first ring, which I was besotted with, in a Holden car. It was just a friendship ring, but that led to an engagement ring, which led to a wedding ring.
It's an iconic brand. For me, it's been a symbol of Australian motoring.
No other car performs like it, because Holden is the only car designed and built for Australia.
This is the new Australian automobile, designed and tested by General Motors Engineering Department.
The birth of Australia's car industry was a source of great national pride.
In 1948, Chifley wasn't just launching a car, he was building a nation, taking Australia into a future beyond wool and wheat.
For much of the last century, the ability to design and build our own cars was equated with progress and development. But just as today's sleek Commodore bears little resemblance to the FJ or the EH, public attitudes have also changed. By last year, what was once seen as a vital industry was openly jeered as a wasteful drain on the public purse.
Let me just give you some facts. The net combined assistance to the automotive manufacturing industry in 2011 was $1.1 billion of taxpayers' money. $1.1 billion in 1 year. There's a hell of a lot of industries in Australia that would love to get the assistance that the motor vehicle industry is getting.
Today we're announcing that Holden will cease manufacturing in Australia by the end of 2017. This will mean the eventual closure of our Elizabeth plant, as well as our Victorian engine plant, our engineering centre, and our proving grounds down at Langley.
It was the news that thousands of Holden workers didn't want to hear.
I thought that I would be there for the rest of my working career.
Jeff DeMott has worked on the Holden assembly line at Elizabeth in South Australia since 2001. Jeff spent 7 years in the army, serving as a peacekeeper in East Timor. When he left the forces, he thought working at Holden was an ideal job for a bloke raising a family.
I think that working in the manufacturing industry, the people that actually are attracted to that type of work actually take pride in their work. They like to feel like they're actually achieving, a good quality product, and I think that's what we do at Holden. We do make a very good product. Well, who's going to win the footy first showdown?
Port versus Crows.
Port versus Crows. Who do you think's going to win? Port. We know Port's going to win, don't we? Easily.
Jeff's wife Vanessa remembers the day late last year when Holden announced it would stop making cars here.
Day was a very dismal day. It was obviously all over the media, on the radio, so everywhere you sort of went or, you got in the car, you could hear it on the car.
The day of the announcement, I came home from work and basically I sat in my car when I drove into my driveway and I was listening to talkback radio, listening to all the people that were criticising us workers, criticising the union, saying that, it's the union fault for pushing the wages so high, which is just totally wrong.
What do you make working on the line?
My gross wage is roughly around $50,000 per year.
I think he's feeling very gutted inside. I think it's the uncertainty of everything. You don't know what's going to happen. We can't predict. We don't know how it's going to affect our kids.
What impact?
The family has a hefty mortgage to service, but Jeff is as concerned for his colleagues as he is for himself.
There are people where I work that are in their 50s, in 55, they're getting close to retirement. They're not going to be able to secure full-time work. Most likely it's going to be very difficult for them. It's going to be difficult for me and I'm 40.
The experience of Mitsubishi workers is an ominous sign. Flinders University tracked hundreds of workers who lost their jobs when Mitsubishi closed its doors in 2008. 2 years on, only a third of them had found full-time jobs. A third were rotating in and out of casual work, and a third never worked again.
There's not much work around, so we're off work at the moment. We might not be working for about another month, 2 months, and of course we don't get paid for it because we're casual.
John worked at Mitsubishi for 13 years. He's only had dribs and drabs of casual work since. Ocean fishing's his passion, but if he doesn't get work soon, he'll be forced to sell his boat to keep up the home mortgage repayments.
Well, all I can say is when Holdens, Toyotas close up, be careful with your money, because if you go and spend it stupidly, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. It's going to be very hard to find work. So you've got to live off that day by day.
Show you something, Steve, which they gave me. That's for 25 years of service.
Okay. For 25 years of dedicated service to General Motors.
And there's another one I've got. This one here was the 30 years. 30 years of service.
30 years. Not quite a gold watch, but...
No, close enough. And by the way, Steve...
Albi Petricaro has spent most of his working life at Holden. If it lasts that long, he'll have clocked up 35 years of service when the last car comes off the assembly line in 2017.
That's correct. Every car you see on the road, you know that you've made something that's in that car. And you see the person driving with a big grin on his face. Think, look at that. You bought a car that I've put a part in.
He's deeply saddened by the looming closure.
Come December, they made the announcement. But the guys in front of me, when we did the announcement on afternoon shift, there's guys in front of me crying. It's fucking hard. It really is hard. You see these guys standing there and crying. Grown men, because they've got a family to support. But no, we don't care. Nobody cares. Governments don't give a shit. You know, they should support people paying off their houses, their kids. It is frustrating.
For the Petrocaros, Holden has been a family affair, with 3 generations employed by the company.
My dad come here with a suitcase for a milling. A suitcase, nothing else but a suitcase. No money in his pocket. Then he brought out my uncle. They both worked at Holden's. My uncle did 55 years, my dad, until the day he died, did 32. I've done 32. And my son, 1.5 years, and he got retrenched.
Tens of thousands of migrants like the Petrocaros came to Australia and found work in the car industry. It was the post-war vision: populate the wide brown land, build the skills base, and grow the economy with a protected manufacturing industry providing decent jobs. Nowhere encapsulated that vision more than Elizabeth.
My husband and I are delighted to have been able to come and see Elizabeth and so many of its people. May this town and its people prosper and develop in the years to come.
Named in honour of Her Majesty and home to thousands of £10 poms.
Elizabeth grew up as a new town, essentially, around the auto industry and the white goods industry. It was a very proud area of manufacturing, and the city itself was a modern city designed to support a young and thriving manufacturing community.
General Motors Holden's is pretty big business up this way now, with a modern, well-equipped factory in very pleasant surroundings.
South Australia attracted Holden to Elizabeth with the offer of cheap land and power, along with a willing workforce paid a modest wage, but given subsidised housing.
There's a place for you in Elizabeth, where there's housing that gives plenty of opportunity for you to create a real home for your family.
In Elizabeth today, you can still see the remnants of that model city. But you don't have to go far to find the fallout of deindustrialisation and urban decay.
So some of these are the old factory buildings that are pretty derelict from a previous wave of industrialisation, and not a lot goes on inside these buildings.
Our guide in Elizabeth is Peter Sanderman, the CEO of Anglicare in South Australia.
So you could conservatively say there's about a 50% youth unemployment rate here in reality in the northern suburbs in Elizabeth and Playford.
That's fairly shocking.
It's not unknown in this region. This is an area where you've got third generation families where nobody's ever worked.
The jobless rate in Elizabeth is more than 21%, one of the highest in the country. Its school completion rates are among the lowest. As tariff barriers that protected manufacturing were gradually pulled down, Elizabeth has morphed from workers' housing to welfare housing to wasted housing.
Well, as you can see, there's a number of derelict houses in the area. There's been a good attempt to try and redevelop the area and bring life back to it, but the Holden's decision, I'm afraid, is going to mean that investors are going to be less keen to invest in the area, and so the whole revitalisation program, I think, is now going to be thrown into some question, because where are the jobs going to be?
This was the model town, the new town that was meant to be
Oh, in the 1950s, this was the vision splendid of the British Newtown coming to Adelaide. The designers laid out the place beautifully, walkable shopping centres, local schools, local churches, fantastic layout. But unfortunately, it's got everything it needs except an economy.
This is now the growth industry.
We haven't got enough staff at the moment, so as soon as we've got all the food out, come up and we'll make your teas and coffees, all right?
At Anglicare's Elizabeth Mission, they're doling out free meals for the poor.
Thank you, my darling. You're welcome.
Brenda Davis, a volunteer here, has lived in Elizabeth or nearby all her life.
Jane, would you like sugar?
2 of her 3 adult children are unemployed.
Thank you very much.
How many people are you feeding here a day, Brenda?
Usually anything between 50 and 100. The clients are in need of a feed and they're very appreciative of it, and there's no questions asked. Everybody's welcome.
What do you think of the situation here in North Adelaide and Elizabeth?
I think it's very sad that what's happened to Holden, and what could be in the end, we could be seeing a lot of clients in here. We could be seeing a lot more people to feed.
No, it's $2 too. I think we're doing that. And we're looking for something else.
The demand for food parcels is already overwhelming.
Okay. I think we're going to be snowed under. As you see now, we're hectic now. I can hate to see what it's going to be like down the track. I think we're going to be, full on.
At Elizabeth, Holden is ingrained in the community.
Welcome to senior teams to the ground.
It's the major sponsor of the local football team, the Central District Bulldogs. About half the club's members either work at Holden or have family ties to a Holden employee.
When the news came through, what was the impact in the community here?
Shock is probably the biggest, and then just horror, because, what's going to happen? I mean, it's like your stomach drops out, like, my God, it's something that's been an institution that's been there for so long, and it's always been expected to be there, and all of a sudden it's like a bomb's hit. It's not there.
This is the VF Commodore, the latest model and the last one they'll build here, and it's still one of the most popular cars in Australia. This car's full of high-tech gadgets and engineering nous. Built from thousands of parts made in more than 100 factories across Australia. And the big question is, when they stop making cars here, what will the fallout be?
This form of restructuring will have quite profound effects on individual regions and quite narrowly defined regions, but not necessarily have a significant effect on the economy as a whole.
But others argue there will be a significant impact on the national economy.
The impacts are going to be devastating, particularly in an area like Elizabeth.
Yeah, we were up there the other day.
John Spear runs the Workplace Innovation and Social Research Centre at the University of Adelaide.
Yeah, we commissioned this report on the full impact of the closure of the automobile industry in Australia. And
according to new research it's commissioned, direct and indirect job losses from the end of car making could number in the hundreds of thousands.
As you can see here, the impacts are around about 200,000 jobs nationally.
That's a massive impact. So is that the ripple effects moving beyond auto through other industries?
Absolutely. It goes right down through the supply chain, right down to the corner store. And what you can see here is that's direct and indirect jobs, and around about $29 billion in economic activity over 4 years. This is the worst case scenario. If there is no substantial intervention, and if the workers find it difficult to find alternative jobs, and the companies affected find it very difficult to transition, then you would expect that the impact will be very severe.
In Adelaide, Car Components has been supplying auto parts since the industry's earliest days, way back in 1928. But history counts for little, and its future is precarious at best. 85% of its output goes to Holden.
The simple fact of the matter is that come D-Day, whatever that day happens to be, there's 70 people that have worked for me that aren't going to have a job. One of those will be me. Look, I've been here 20 years. I started on the floor with them. We move about 4,000 tonne a year of coil steel. Straight away, that's all from BlueScope. That's gone. Then right down to the other spectrum, the guy that fills our vending machines here with chips and drinks on a daily basis. We're 40% of his business. That's gone.
I started off my life as came straight out of school.
Co-director Daniel Bell started out as an apprentice toolmaker.
And then followed on by doing my advanced diploma in mechanical engineering, then went on and did my postgraduate through uni. So
that's a real path for guys who want to work with their hands, or men and women who want to work with their hands.
Definitely, and how are you going to get that opportunity now going forward without the industry there?
He's worried the loss of car manufacturing will undermine the nation's skills base. Australia's car manufacturing industry directly employs some 44,000 people, with about 30,000 workers in the car components sector.
Your core or bed skills are going to go, and they generally are generated from the automotive industry because they employ so many people. And when you employ so many people, you have universities and TAFEs and so on that are built around these industries. Once that industry isn't there anymore, you don't need the services that go with it.
We can't all make coffees. We can't all serve cocktails for the tourist industry. You know, there has to be a widespread of employment opportunities in any country.
The company's invested more than $20 million in advanced robotics and machinery. In the past 8 years, with no loss of jobs, it's lifted productivity by 400%, while expanding the range and complexity of its output. But unless it can reinvent itself, that investment will be worthless.
Most of that equipment, or a great lot of that equipment, will be scrap metal.
How many of the car components manufacturers do you think will survive?
Unfortunately, my view is very few. I think you're talking of a number of somewhere between 20 and 25%.
Will survive?
Will survive.
There have been a number, albeit a bit too small, a number of component companies who have really understood the challenge that are before them. They will do well. They will do well because they saw this coming, they planned for it, they put in place good management systems to enable them to operate under a highly competitive market. They've diversified and they've established themselves in other markets in other countries in the world.
What proportion of car component manufacturers have done that?
Oh, I would put that at less than 10%.
Car Components was one of many local companies offered inducements to move offshore and join the booming Thai car industry.
So it was only 2 years ago that Thailand Board of Investment came to us and other companies in South Australia and Victoria and made particular offers to us. Just for example, 7 years corporate tax-free, 3 to 8 years tax-free for our employees, free land, etc., etc.
Why didn't you go?
Look, our base is here, our families are here. We want to run our business here. But there are other companies that I know that have taken the opportunity and moved the skills and moved the technology to there.
Like Thailand and Korea now, Australia built its car industry in the 20th century behind massive walls of protection and assistance.
This is the new Holden.
Import quotas, tariffs, local content schemes.
New engines.
The layers of protection allowed the nation to build manufacturing capacity, jobs and skills. But they came at a considerable cost.
Well, the consequences were many. First of all, the effect was the prices were higher than they would otherwise have been in this country. So Australians were paying substantially higher prices for their motor cars than almost anybody else in the world. The other element, of course, which was very important, has become even more important over time, is the quality tended to be lower because there was less competition.
Even die-hard Holden enthusiasts Arthur and Gail Martin acknowledged the downside of the protectionist era.
They didn't exactly come with all the mod cons, though, when they were built, these cars, did they?
No, they didn't. In the early 60s or 64, they didn't have things like heaters and radios, demisters as a standard item. So if it wasn't for the Japanese imported cars at the time, we may still not be driving around with a heater, demister or a radio.
Standard Corona luxuries include heater demister and electric washers, 4 headlights, and reversing lights too. Journey's End.
It wasn't until the competition came in from the Japanese cars then that Holden had to lift its game on.
It did really, yeah. And that's been, I think, the case with a lot of features and innovations that car companies have done as they've imported cars. We've been sort of playing catch up really.
Arthur, Gale and the E.H. Holden reached their destination. A classic car rally at Healesville in the Yarra Ranges northeast of Melbourne. There's row after row of Fords and Holdens from the days when these cars ruled the road. When this Holden Premier rolled off the production line in 1978, the trade barriers protecting the local industry were at their highest. But that was all about to change.
The flagging fortunes of General Motors Holden demonstrate the uphill battle for survival that local manufacturers face against Japanese competition and plain economics in the Australian sphere.
When Four Corners reported on the Australian car industry in 1978, inefficient local plants were foundering despite sky-high tariffs and import quotas.
I have here your invoice now with the agreed price of $6,951.
And the cost of cars was a burning political issue.
The price of a car in this country is about 50% higher than a comparable car just about anywhere else in the world. And right now there's enormous buyer resistance to the price of Australian cars.
Apart from poor economies of scale,
even the industry became so concerned about this that when the Labor government came into power, the Hawke-Keating Labor government came into power, they actually said to the government of the time, we need to do something about this. Quite frankly, there have been almost as many reports as cars produced. But
so we got 1983, 85...
2002, 1993.
And you've been involved in most of these?
I've been involved in most of them.
As head of the Automotive Industry Authority, Bill Scales oversaw the biggest shake-up in the car industry's history.
It had to be an industry that could survive based on high levels of productivity, high levels of quality, and provide consumers with vehicles that they wanted to purchase.
In the mid-1980s, the Hawke government began the process of dismantling car industry protection. Since then, we've gone from the most protected car market in the world to the most open. As the tariffs fell and the quotas were scrapped, car imports rose and rose. By 1997, for the first time, the market share of locally made cars fell below 50%. In 2006 to just 25%. By last year, Australian-made cars accounted for less than 12% of sales.
It really comes down to the fact that consumers don't want to be bound by one style of car, one size of car, one type of car. There is an enormous choice out there, and the consumers vote with their feet.
These days we're spoilt for choice. 50 different brands, more than 330 different models. More makes of car on offer here than in the US, though Australia has a fraction of the population. It's the most competitive and fragmented car market in the world. So fragmented that a local plant could produce 4 of the top-selling models and still not be viable.
If they produced the #1 seller in the small car segment, in the compact SUV segment, and in a couple of other segments, they would have only sold last year 75,000 cars. That's about a third of what you really need to do to make a factory work.
For a while, it looked as if exports might save the day.
Three cheers for the 3 millionth export engine. Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip!
Then came the global financial crisis and the soaring currency.
It was a perfect storm. The high dollar killed exports and made imported cars a lot cheaper. Then there were the trade deals. Zero tariffs on cars from Thailand and pretty soon from Korea and Japan, three of the biggest sources of car imports, and all countries which pretty much have a closed-door policy to foreign cars at home. In the face of all this, governments responded with direct financial assistance to try and keep the Australian car industry alive, and Labor was prepared to ramp the assistance up.
I believe in the car industry. I believe in the 200,000 jobs which are supported directly and indirectly by the industry.
This is an investment, not a subsidy. An investment in capacity, skills, innovation.
But the party poised to win power had a very different view. The coalition government cut back on Labor's subsidies, and after years of bipartisan support for car industry assistance, it did a major policy U-turn.
I want Australia to be a country that makes things. We can make things, make sophisticated things in this country without a government subsidy. It's essentially about $500 million a year that's available to the motor industry. It's a lot of money now. It's available to the motor industry, but there is no more.
Calling on Holden to come clean with his...
Behind the scenes, the new government was telling journalists that Holden had already made up its mind to pull the pin on production.
Either you're here or you're not.
What role do you think the attitude of the new government played in the demise of the car industry?
It certainly didn't kill manufacturing, because I think there was an inevitability to the death of the local car manufacturing, but it didn't help.
2 months after Holden's announcement, Australia's only remaining car maker followed suit.
It is one of the saddest days in Toyota's history.
As the news sank in, unions and workers found themselves in the firing line.
Toyota demands IR reform. Remember that...
When a government subsidises an industry, some of the gains of that will be snaffled by the employer, but the trade unions and the workers will see that and think, yeah, look, we want a piece of that action.
According to Holden management, 90% of the workers at the Holden Elizabeth plant earn between $43,000 and $55,000 a year.
Well, I mean, for quite a few of those jobs, which are pretty unskilled, by the way, that's actually a relatively high rate of pay. And they have other bits and pieces. For example, they have the roster days off. They have, lots of other conditions which a lot of other workers don't have. So,
you think 43 to 55,000 is a high rate of pay in this country?
Well, it's all relative to the opportunity cost. And, of course, relative to unemployment benefits, it is quite a high rate of pay.
Workers in general are sick and tired of hearing that they're greedy and lazy and unproductive when we've done everything we possibly could to keep the company viable and make our contribution to help Holden stay in Australia.
For a guy your age...
Murray Akehurst is a union delegate at Holden's Elizabeth plant.
Well, during the GFC, we went to working week on, week off to keep the company viable, and even though that really hurt a lot of people, we're prepared to do it because we realised that, the company are in strife and we have to do this or we're not going to make it. We accepted a pay freeze for 3 years.
The labour cost in car manufacturing is around 8 to 10%, and that means it's a very small chunk of the total costs.
What role did industrial relations play in the demise of the car industry?
Well, I mean, it played a part. It's not the central part, in my view. The central issue, in my view, is that there was never sufficient volume in this country to be able to produce the level of volume of vehicles that would enable the industry to survive on its own.
As manufacturing dwindles and the industry that took the nation beyond wool and wheat departs, there are concerns that Australia is destined to become a farm and a quarry.
What we are seeing in Australia at the moment is a rapid hollowing out of the economy. In other words, we lose our economic complexity.
Joran Roos is a renowned expert on innovation, technology and the future of industry. He's advised governments in the UK, Scandinavia, Spain and South Australia. He's one of many who fear the mining boom and the high dollar are destroying our manufacturing capacity.
If we do not make things, that means we do not sell things, but we still want to buy things. The question then becomes, where is the money going to come from that allows us to buy the things we want as a country? And yes, the services will be able to do some of that, but to replace the manufacturing export that we do have, there's going to be a very, very large growth needed in the services industry.
Compared to the services industry, manufacturing has high productivity, car manufacturing in particular. Unlike mining, it takes raw materials and adds value to them.
If we do not have the manufacturing that adds value to the raw materials, we are not capturing all the value we can. And that has implications for our standard of living.
We're just digging up things and growing things and sending them overseas unprocessed.
Basically, that is it. And that is a big challenge for the economy. And if we do not change that and add more value, we are, relatively speaking, having to reduce our standard of living.
This is the future of manufacturing. Gleaming, high-tech and high-skilled. Redarc at Lonsdale in the south of Adelaide is a world away from the dark satanic mills of the Industrial Revolution.
So once that door closes, then we can go in through the next door and into the clean room.
It's hermetically sealed in here.
That's right. We control temperature, humidity and dust.
Wow, so what could you make here?
We could even make medical products that's so clean.
Incredible.
Redarc makes advanced electronics. Its products include isolators that shift power between different batteries.
The circuit board. So it's an amazingly quick machine, loads about 16,000 components every hour. The circuit design...
Managing Director Anthony Kittle began his career in the auto industry.
So like your smartphone.
There's no reason why Australian manufacturing can't thrive moving forward. It has to be advanced manufacturing. You know, we can't be traditional manufacturers of the past where we're just putting a widget into a machine.
We can adjust these rails down to suit you. Okay?
Redarc began as a backyard operation with a handful of staff. It now employs 100 people and has a turnover of $25 million. But it didn't get there on its own. When Mitsubishi shut its Adelaide engine plant in 2005, Redarc gained a $1.6 million government grant tied to targets for job creation. It provided critical capital for expansion.
Government's got to be involved. There's a lot about developing a new product. You can't do that on your own, so you've got to work with universities, and government has a role to play there as well in stimulating the innovation in a state, in a country.
If it's just left to the market, what will happen?
Oh, if it's just left to the market, then it's going to be bloody tough for sure.
There was more than a hint of irony last month when luminaries gathered in Melbourne for a conference on the cars of tomorrow.
Well, who would have thought, standing up here this time last year and standing up here today, that we would have managed to lose our car industry?
But there were lessons on offer for Australia
Neville Jackson,
as it debates what role, if any, government should play in supporting manufacturing. In the early 2000s, the UK's vehicle industry was moribund.
Lots of job losses. Overall, direct job losses there, 11,000. Using the Department for Business multiplier on indirect, that takes us to about 95,000 job losses from auto industry in the UK. You're beginning to feel what that is like in Australia, and we've been through it.
After a wave of factory closures, car manufacturing seemed destined to die out.
General attitude was that manufacturing was a sunset industry, that manufacturing was going to move east, was going to move to lower-cost countries, that making things was perhaps something that you couldn't do in the UK anymore, and the future was probably in services.
Then Britain's finance sector collapsed in the Great Recession, and both sides of politics changed their mind. 6 years on, the car industry is the UK's biggest export sector, with a global reputation for innovation and quality.
The turnaround in the UK really came from a view from government that we need to have a more positive strategy to what was called rebalancing the economy. That a lot of jobs were being lost. We couldn't make up for all those jobs in the services sector because they were the wrong type of jobs, and that we needed to find a better balance between manufacturing, services and other sectors, particularly advanced manufacturing, where you would look for very high quality, you look at added value, not necessarily very simple components, but things that could actually add value to the economy.
Would you have achieved all that if the government had merely left it to the market?
In my view, no, absolutely not. It just would not have happened.
Can we transition towards advanced manufacturing simply through the market, or does government have to play a role?
I mean, what is the evidence that governments really help on this? You know, like, I lived in South Australia for a long time, and they'd have sort of precincts and clusters and bureaucrats sort of giving out free advice and the like. You know, I'm not sure that that sort of thing ever works at all.
Where do you see Australia's economy in 10 years' time?
Well, I see two scenarios. One in which we decide to take decisive action, and one where we just lean back and look at what's happening around us. In the second one, I think Australia will start to become a third world country in its living standard. We are not going to be able to maintain the living standard we have now because the money that we generate into our system is too low.
For the next 3 years, thousands of workers like Albi Petricaro will journey to work knowing that they have no future in automotive manufacturing. For many, there may be few alternative careers.
I'm just frustrated now. It's just every day you go there to work, you know, and you see their face and you think, you can tell people just hanging on and hanging on. But in their minds, and they're exactly like me, they're thinking, what am I going to do next? Where am I going to go?
Across in Melbourne, Arthur Martin is doing up another old Holden. This one's an EK, just like the shiny car with those slick fins that was used to attract migrants to Elizabeth all those years ago.
I reckon she'll be a beauty when she's finished.
Yeah, it'll be a nice car. I'm looking forward to that. I remember when they were brand new and off the production line, they were a good-looking car.
Do you reckon you'll have this old EK restored by the time the last Holden comes off the production line in Australia?
Yeah, I'm hoping I will. Yeah.
And that might be the future of car assembly here, blokes like you doing them up in their backyards.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a shame.
And we should tell you Industry Minister Ian Macfarlane was unavailable to participate in the program. He has issued a number of press releases and statements which are on our website. A spokesperson for the Minister has told Four Corners that the Australian Government is continuing to work with industry in South Australia and Victoria to build the industries of the future. Next week on Four Corners, a special Easter Anzac Day presentation. 70 years on from the D-Day landings, we relive the drama and the horror of these events that were crucial in ending World War II. Until then, good night.